I always thought they'd remember, that if I ever meant anything to them, truly meant something, they'd show it when it counted. Turns out they did, just not the way I hoped. It started with a voicemail from my son Caleb 1 week before Thanksgiving. Just his voice, rushed upbeat, in that way people are when they're reading from a script they wrote to sound sincere. "Hey Ma, just thinking about you. Thought maybe you'd like to come out this year?" Lacey says the kids were asking. You know holidays aren't the same without Grandma June. That part stung, not because of the words, but because of how polished they sounded. I replayed it 4 times. Not once did he say, "We miss you." Just the kids were asking. Like I was a seasonal decoration. But still, I said yes. I said it before I could talk myself out of it. Before the aching memory of last Thanksgiving eating reheated stuffing alone with a crime documentary in the background could cloud the moment. I said yes because somewhere in me, some part that hadn't hardened yet, still believed I mattered. I booked the flight myself, non-stop from Dayton to Atlanta. Caleb didn't offer to cover it, and I didn't ask. That's never been my way. I used a little leftover money from when I sold my wedding band, hadn't worn it in years, and I figured it was time that gold did something besides sit in a drawer. I went all out, like it was my first trip ever. Baked shortbread cookies, the day before, the kind Caleb used to eat raw from the dough bowl. Brought my best coat, the one with the faux fur collar that Lacey always complimented just enough to make it feel like a jab. I even bought colouring books for the twins and a tie for Caleb, navy with little oak leaves on it. Thought it might make him look more like the man I remembered raising. But let me tell you what I didn't bring expectations. At least I thought I didn't. Thanksgiving morning, I was standing by Gate 18 at Hartsfield-Jackson. The plane landed early. I'd called the day before, texted that morning, and sent my arrival time twice, once to Caleb, once to Lacey. Excited to see you, I'd typed, because saying I love you had started to feel like mailing letters to a dead address. I stood by the pickup zone for 40 minutes. The sidewalk outside was buzzing with greetings, soldiers coming home, babies in fleece hats, someone holding a Nana's Here sign in glitter glue. I smiled at that one, then looked away, quick, like I'd broken some rule. My suitcase, old, red, loud-wheeled, sat beside me like a dog waiting for its leash. My phone buzzed once, not a call, not even a text. A notification from social media. I clicked it. A tagged photo from Lacey. There they were. In the backyard, I helped them finance 6 years ago. Folding chairs around a long wooden table. Plastic pumpkins. String lights. Caleb in the tie I mailed him last Father's Day, holding up a glass of wine. Lacey beaming. The twins in matching orange sweaters. The caption, "So thankful for our crew. Happy Turkey Day from the Wallace family." I stared so hard I forgot to blink. Zoomed in. Scanned the photo. There was no extra plate. No sign of a chair moved. No one looking off screen waiting for anyone to arrive. There was no mistake. They weren't late. They were done. I didn't cry. Not then. Not there. I just stood a little straighter like I'd just been slapped, but didn't want the world to see the red mark bloom. I picked up the suitcase, rolled it past the smokers, past the rideshare signs, past the family with the glitter sign now climbing into a van full of coats and love. I didn't know where I was walking. I just knew I couldn't stay there. Not in that space between expectation and explanation. Not where anyone else could see how thoroughly I'd been erased. I sat on a bench outside Terminal North, under a tree that had already lost most of its leaves. My phone buzzed again. Not Caleb. Not Lacey. Claire. My granddaughter from Caleb's first marriage. 24, studying psychology, working weekends at a shelter for abused women. She didn't know I was supposed to visit. She had no idea I was sitting on cold concrete 3 states from home, with cookies going stale in my tote bag. She sent me a cat meme. Something about that broke me more than any forgotten pickup. Because even without knowing it, she'd seen me. She'd included me in her day without obligation. Just because. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I booked a motel room nearby. Budget place beige curtains, card readers that never worked the first time. I took a cab there with a driver who didn't ask questions, who played old R&B through a cracked speaker. I thanked him twice when I got out. The room smelled faintly of bleach and dust, but it had heat, a clean bathroom, and a chair by the window where I sat and looked out at a parking lot full of people going somewhere. I thought of calling Caleb. I did. But I realized I didn't want an apology that sounded like a calendar reminder. I didn't want Lacey's voice pretending surprise. I didn't want another explanation that blamed confusion or the crazy week. What I wanted was to stop asking to be remembered. I pulled out my cookies and ate 2 of them straight from the tin. Not because they were fresh, but because for once they were mine. That first night in the motel, I didn't sleep much. The sheets were stiff and smelled like someone else's detergent. The heater groaned every time it kicked on, and the bathroom light flickered when I walked past. But none of that was what kept me up. It was the echo, not the sound, but the absence of one. Silence after you've been forgotten is different from normal quiet. It's heavy. It hums behind your ribs like a second heartbeat. It plays back every kindness you gave and asks, what was it for? Around midnight, I got up and made motel coffee, the kind that tastes like scorched dirt and comfort at the same time. I sat on the edge of the bed with my notebook on my lap. Not the little one I use for grocery lists. This was the older leather-bound one, the one I hadn't touched in years. I bought it back when Caleb was going through his divorce, when everything needed tracking, and no one else seemed capable of keeping record. On the first clean page, I wrote in block letters what I gave, what they forgot. And then the memories came faster than I expected. $2,000 for their first house's closing costs. Watching the twins for 6 weekends straight when Lacey had shingles. Loan for the down payment on their SUV never repaid. C'est tout chill. Baking 200 cupcakes for Ruby's 5th birthday party. Taking a bus in the snow to bring them soup when Lacey had the flu. The power bill I covered after Caleb's hours got cut. The babysitting, the cleaning, the errands, the emotional labor of being available. By the time the list spilled onto the 3rd page, I stopped. Not because I was out of things to write, but because I was ashamed. Ashamed of how much I'd poured into people who treated me like background noise, like filler in a photo, like a spare seat if someone cancelled last minute. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just hollowed out. The next morning, I took a long shower, letting the hot water run until the bathroom mirror fogged. I didn't rush. That was new. I got dressed in my navy slacks, the ones I usually save for church or funerals, and slipped on my loafers. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought I don't want to go home yet. Not like this. So I didn't. Instead, I took a cab to a small law office I hadn't seen in years, the kind where the carpet is always too thin and the receptionist calls you sweetheart, even if you're paying her boss $200 an hour. The lawyer, Mr. Darrow, was the same age as Caleb. Clean-shaven, soft hands, eyes like someone who'd never been forgotten in a parking lot. He looked surprised to see me. "Mrs. Wallace," he said. "It's been a while." I nodded, setting my purse down slowly. "I need to make changes to my estate," I said. "Big ones?" His fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "Is this urgent?" "It's overdue." We spent the next hour going over everything, my accounts, the house title, my retirement benefits, even the life insurance policy I took out when Caleb was in high school just in case. I want it all placed into a living trust, I told him. And I want my granddaughter Claire to be the sole beneficiary. He blinked. Not your son, no. He's already gotten his share. He just forgot to call it that. Darrow didn't ask for details. I could tell he'd heard enough versions of this story, different names, same shape. Generous parent entitled Child Forgotten Dignity. And Claire, he asked gently. Why her? She calls me just to talk. She never asks for anything. We went through paperwork. I signed what I needed. I requested that he prepare a power of attorney revocation too. Caleb had held that for years, not because he earned it, but because I was too tired to consider alternatives. By noon it was done, not finalized yet, but in motion. Something shifted in me as I left that office, not pride, not satisfaction, but centeredness. I had taken the first step back to myself. I spent the rest of that afternoon walking. There was a park near the motel with brittle trees and ducks waddling by a half-frozen pond. I sat on a bench and watched a young couple argue in hushed voices while their toddler giggled at a squirrel. Life goes on, even when you're grieving people who aren't dead. That night I texted Claire. Just 3 words, love you, honey. She replied within seconds, I love you too, Grandma. You okay? I didn't answer right away, but I did sleep better. The following day, I went back to the motel with a grocery bag in hand, tea soup crackers, and a box of chocolates I didn't need but wanted. I sat by the window, flipping through old pages in the notebook. At the back, I found a page I'd scribbled in 2012. It was a note to myself. When they make you feel small, remember you raised a man from nothing. You survived every season. You were always more than they gave back. I'd forgotten writing it. I'd forgotten believing it. A knock came on the motel door late that evening. It wasn't Caleb, wasn't Lacey. Just a delivery guy with no tip line on the receipt. I hadn't ordered anything but Claire had. Chicken pot pie cornbread and a note on the bag. Thought you might like something warm. I miss you. That's when the tears came. Not the angry kind. Not even the lonely kind. The kind that feel like rain on parched ground. Like maybe your roots are still alive underneath it all. The pie was warm. The motel TV played a rerun of Jeopardy while I ate. I didn't flip through my phone. I didn't check Caleb's socials. I didn't look for apology texts. I just was. And that I realized was more than I'd allowed myself to be in years. 3 days after I got home, the knock came. Not the frantic kind. Not the I'm sorry kind. Just 3 firm, practiced raps, like someone rehearsed how loud to knock, to seem sincere but not desperate. I opened the door, and there she was. Lacey. Her hair was sprayed into that sleek bun she wears when she wants to look composed. Her makeup was fresh, too fresh for someone just dropping by. She wore those beige heels that made her walk like the ground wasn't good enough for her. She didn't say my name right away, just smiled with her mouth, but not her eyes. Mind if I come in? I stood still for a moment, just long enough for her to notice. Then I stepped aside. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine cleaner. I'd made sure of that. Not for her, but for me. I'd lit a candle earlier, set a teacup by the sink, washed the kitchen towels. I didn't want chaos. I wanted quiet. Lacey walked into the living room and took the edge of the couch like someone afraid to wrinkle it. She placed her designer tote on the floor carefully and folded her hands in her lap. I sat in my usual armchair, the one with the fraying arms and dented cushion like a throne I'd earned the right to reclaim. I wanted to come by, she began, already performing. I know there's been some tension. Caleb's been trying to reach you. We thought maybe you were upset about something. I tilted my head. You thought. She shifted just slightly. Well, there was some miscommunication, clearly. I think Caleb thought your flight was Friday, not Thursday. It was all very chaotic, you know how holidays can get. I didn't nod. I didn't interrupt. She kept going. The photo, the one on Instagram that was just something I posted quickly. I didn't even think about it at the time. That's clear, I said. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We weren't trying to hurt you, June. But you did. That stopped her for a second. She picked at her cuticle eyes, flicking toward the window. I mean, she tried again, voice smoothing into what she used on realtors and parent-teacher conferences. It was a mistake. A misunderstanding. And now you're pulling back. It's making Caleb anxious. The kids have been asking why you're not calling. We're trying to reconnect. Get past all this. There it was. Get past it. Like grief is a puddle you jump over. Like betrayal is a bug on your windshield, annoying, but nothing a quick wipe won't fix. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I've given your family 15 years of dinners, dollars, and dignity. And you forgot me. You didn't just forget to pick me up. You forgot I existed in that moment, at that table, in that photo, in your lives. And now you're not here because you're sorry. You're here because something's changed and you don't know what it is. She blinked. Twice. You've been pulling away, she repeated, but less confident now. Financially, I mean. And the legal stuff. Caleb noticed, and we were just wondering. You noticed I corrected. That's good. I wanted you to. Her hands stilled. I've made some decisions, I said. On paper. And in my heart. I've stopped showing up where I'm not seen. I've stopped funding people who treat me like an afterthought. And I've started investing in someone who calls me just to ask how I'm sleeping. You mean Claire? I nodded. Yes. Claire. The one who didn't need a trust to remember my birthday. Lacey sat back like she'd been slapped. But I hadn't raised a hand. I had raised a mirror. You're punishing Caleb, she said, voice tightening. No, I said. I'm freeing myself. There's a difference. She stood suddenly. Does Caleb know about the trust? About all of this? I imagine he's figured it out by now, I said. You usually send him in to ask for things, don't you? Her jaw twitched. She bent to pick up her bag, but not before saying, You're really willing to cut off your own son? Your family? I stood too, slowly, with intention. I was his family, I said softly, but he hasn't been mine for a long time. She stared at me, really stared like she'd never bothered to before. And maybe that was true. Maybe she thought I was just the woman who made pies and kept her opinions in check. She hadn't noticed the line had been drawn, only now that she was on the other side of it. Well, she said stiffly, stepping toward the door. I hope you're happy. I'm not chasing happy, I said. I'm chasing honest. And I've finally caught up. She paused at the threshold. The sun was setting behind her, casting a strange light through her hair. Caleb's really worried, she said. One last try. He should be, I said. Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back. And then I closed the door. Not with a slam, not with anger, just a soft, steady click. Like punctuation at the end of a long, unfinished sentence. The next morning, the phone rang. I didn't move. I let it ring out, let the voicemail do the listening for me. I'd started measuring time, not by how often they called, but by how little it shook me. Later, when the kettle was on and the radio hummed low, jazz in the background, I finally tapped into the message. It was Caleb. His voice sounded thin, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Mum? Hey. Just calling again. I'm not sure what's going on, but we're worried. You're not answering. Claire hasn't said much either. Look, if we messed something up, I know we did, just let's talk. Please. Just let me explain. He paused there like he wanted me to jump in, even though it was a recording. Then he added, I saw the documents from Darrow's office. The trust. I didn't even know you'd been seeing a lawyer. I wish you'd told me. I didn't know things were this bad. Another long pause. Just call me okay, click. I didn't call. It wasn't out of cruelty. It was out of preservation. I had built something quiet and whole out of everything they didn't say, and I didn't want to crack it open just to let their regret crawl in. Instead, I went to the drawer by the fridge and pulled out 2 manila folders. One said, Caleb. The other said, Claire. Caleb's folder was thick, bursting with receipts checks. I'd covered photos of parties I hadn't been invited to, medical statements. I'd quietly paid emails I printed just to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined his tone. Claire's folder was lighter but warmer. Handwritten letters. A birthday card with glitter still flaking off. A note that said, Thank you for always listening when no one else does. I sat at the kitchen table and laid them side by side. One was history, the other legacy. That weekend, Claire came to visit. She didn't ask for money. She didn't even ask why I hadn't come for Thanksgiving. She just showed up with a grocery bag of apple cinnamon and a bottle of red wine we never opened. She hugged me at the door like she meant it, full arms, no air gap, the kind that lingers a second longer than necessary. I made pie dough, I told her. She beamed. Let's bake. We did. 2 pies, 1 pumpkin, 1 apple. We played jazz and danced a little in the kitchen, though neither of us would call it dancing. At one point she said, You seem different. I shrugged. Maybe I just stopped asking to be useful. Claire didn't flinch. Good. That was never your job. Later we played cards and talked about school, about the woman at her clinical rotation who cried during a dressing change and wouldn't let go of her hand. Claire said, Sometimes I think people just need to know someone sees them. I looked at her and smiled. Exactly. Before bed, she placed a folded blanket over my lap, kissed my cheek, and whispered, I'm really proud of you. That nearly did me in. Not because I needed her approval, but because it felt real. Like she wasn't saying it to get anything, just to give something back. After she went to sleep, I sat by the fireplace and watched the embers. In my notebook, I wrote, Family is not who you help the most. It's who would notice if you stopped. The next afternoon, I drove Claire to the train station. She hugged me again at the platform and said I'll call Tuesday after class. I'll be here, I said. And I would. Not just physically. Fully. When I got home, there were 3 missed calls from Caleb. A text from Lacey that said, We're trying June. Don't shut us out. I stared at the screen, then turned it off. You don't get to be remembered only when I stop showing up. That night, I wrote a letter not to them, but for the trust. Darrow said I could include a statement of intent. Something personal. Something clear. I wrote, This is not about revenge. This is about truth. I gave what I had for years, often quietly, always completely. But love that must beg to be noticed is not love, it's service. I choose now to give where I'm not invisible. I signed it, folded it neatly, sealed it in the envelope marked Final Instructions. The first Sunday of December came in slow and quiet. The sky was soft, the way winter skies sometimes are, like a worn bedsheet pulled tight across the rooftops. I opened the windows just enough to feel the bite of air on my skin. Then I closed them again and lit a fire. I didn't decorate this year. No tree, no garland. Just a small pine wreath I'd found at the farmer's market, hung on the front door with a loop of twine. It wasn't for anyone else to see. Just me. a quiet promise that this house was still mine, that I was still in it, not just moving through it like a ghost in old family stories. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed. Claire. She didn't forget. "Hi, Grandma," she said, breathless from walking to class. "Just checking in, like I promised." We talked about her new clinical rotation oncology, heavy work for someone so young. She told me how she'd sat with a patient's daughter who was too scared to cry in front of the nurses. "I just stayed with her," Claire said. Didn't say anything. Just sat. I told her, "That's the bravest kind of presence." There was a pause. "I think I learned that from you." It struck me in the ribs, clean and sharp, like truth always does. "Thank you," I whispered. "I hope I keep earning that. You already did." After we hung up, I sat in the silence for a while, not the kind that comes from being ignored, but the kind you choose, the kind that restores something. I made lunch a grilled cheese and tomato soup, the same thing I used to make for Caleb when he was 6 and too stubborn to admit he was sad. I still knew the rhythm. Bread butter pan. Stir the soup while the edges crisp. I ate alone at my kitchen table. No centerpiece, no second place setting. But the chair across from me wasn't empty, not anymore. It held the space I'd taken back for myself. That evening, I opened the drawer where I'd once kept every receipt, every IOU, every backup plan for people who never offered one in return. I pulled them out, all of them, and fed them one by one into the fireplace, not angrily, not as a ritual of revenge, just as a letting go. The flames crackled, devouring evidence no one else had ever looked at. The co-signed loans, the birthday cards never mailed, the post-it notes with grocery lists from the week I covered their mortgage without asking for payback. All gone, all burned. When the last paper curled into ash, I poured a glass of wine, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion. Turns out reclaiming your life counts. I stood by the window and watched the street lamps blink on. A neighbor walked his dog past my porch and gave a small wave. I nodded back. No words, just presence. The following day, I mailed a small package to Claire. Inside, a photo of the two of us from when she was 7, standing beside a snowman with mismatched mittens. A pair of silver earrings I'd once bought for someone who never wore them. And a handwritten note, "Claire. These are yours now. Not because you asked, not because you needed to earn them, but because you saw me when it would have been easier not to." That's what family is. Love, Grandma June. 3 days later, she called crying. "I don't know what to say," she said. "You already said it," I told her. "When you came, when you called, when you listened." And then we just sat in that silence together, the full kind, the real kind, the kind that doesn't ache. Later that week, Caleb called again, left another voicemail. "Mum, I don't understand what's happening. Lacey said you were cold to her. I don't know what's going on, but this doesn't feel like you." He was right. It wasn't the old me, but it was me now. The woman who no longer filled blank spaces with baked pies and silent forgiveness. The woman who no longer made herself useful in order to feel worthy. The woman who finally stopped handing out her love like it was on clearance. I didn't return his call. I didn't explain. Because the minute I stopped explaining, I felt whole. That night, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, a candle flickering beside me, and a cup of tea cooling in my hands. The wind rustled the pine wreath on the door. Across the street, the Harris kids were stringing lights under their dad's guidance. I could hear laughter, sharp, silly, real. And I smiled. Not because it was my joy, but because joy, like peace, doesn't have to be shared to be understood. I whispered not to anyone, just to the night I am not spare. I am not extra. I am not a seat filler at someone else's table. I'm the whole damn meal. And finally, I believed it. Sometimes the deepest heartbreak doesn't come from shouting matches or slammed doors. It comes from being quietly erased by the people you once would have given everything to. This story reminds us that love without respect isn't love at all, and presence without care doesn't make a family. It's about the slow, silent unraveling of someone's worth in a place they called home, and the quiet courage it takes to stop asking for a seat at a table that was never truly set for them. For anyone who's ever poured into others while receiving little in return, this is your reminder. Your silence has value, your presence is not disposable, and your story matters, even if others refuse to read it. True justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your dignity intact. Sometimes it's choosing peace over performance and deciding without apology that you are enough all on your own. If this story resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment where you realized it was time to stop chasing someone else's approval? Share it if you feel comfortable. If you found meaning in this journey, hit that like button to show your support and subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the quiet strength it takes to reclaim your worth and rewrite your ending. Wherever you are right now, may you find peace, not from being accepted, but from finally accepting yourself.